control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today we're covering something slightly unusual. It's not quite an anthology TV show, but it kind of is. And it is the ABC Movie of the Week. Now, this is unusual because it isn't a sort of show as such. It's more a programmed sort of item that was done by ABC from the late 60s to the mid 70s. However, I feel like it's got enough. Each movie is completely different. Some are dramas, some are comedies, some are horrors, some are sci-fi, they're kind of interesting, right? And I feel like it is worth some coverage and worth some discussion. It was not much I knew about, and I don't really know much about the history of American TV, but it seems to be prominent. I thought it was worth a look. First, I'll talk about ABC Movie of the Week generally, and then talk about the specific movie we're talking about tonight, which is the second one ever broadcast. The first one, I didn't feel quite hit the remit of this show, which is science fiction, horror, mystery, suspense. Though there could be an argument that the first one did fulfill that. However, I picked the second one for a few other reasons. So the ABC Movie of the Week it arose because ABC were at the time considered a distant third to the other main networks in American TV, which was NBC and CBS. There were lots of jokes. It had a sort of a reputation of not many people watched it. It was one of those. And they tried to elevate their sort of standing. And one of the things they considered was something that NBC would do, which was making their own movies. Because apparently movies at this time were demanding quite high fees to be broadcast on TV. And, you know, they were trying to sort of get around those costs by doing something similar. So ABC started their own production of Movie of the Week. NBC had been doing it from the mid-66, I believe, but their ones tended to be 2 hours. They had quite big budgets. ABC wanted something a little shorter. They wanted something that would take about an hour and a half of airtime. So in the end, these were like 75-minute movies, in effect. And they were doing it on half the budget. They tried to sort of get production houses involved, but in the end, the costs were being asked were just too high, so they took it in-house. Though I believe they did have production houses that would tender and make movies for the ABC Movie of the Week. And that's how that came about. And in fact, it worked. ABC Movie of the Week became quite a prestigious event and raised the profile of ABC quite significantly. Apparently, alongside Monday Night Football, that's what really turned it around for ABC as being a sort of player in the field and a significant competitor to the other two. So that's kind of interesting. And there's some quite famous TV movies that came from this run. Off the top of my head, I'd say probably the most famous one is Duel, Steven Spielberg's kind of first feature. Though, you know, he'd been working in TV for a while. It's particularly in the Night Gallery, in fact. But Duel is probably the most famous. My personal favourite is The Night Stalker and the follow-up Night Strangler with Carl Kolchak. But other ones that were considered significant included Tribes, which is about a hippie being conscripted and having to put up with basic training. Stars Michael Jan Vincent. A film I saw in the 70s when it came out, when it was first aired on British TV. And I still remember it quite distinctly and rather fondly. So there is that. It also functioned as producing backdoor pilots in many respects for several series. Ones that went on to become and the one I'm talking about after this did lead to a very short run short series, a single season that was cut short. However, successful ones included Kung Fu, Starsky and Hutch, and there were a few others as well. So in all, this is kind of an interesting era in American TV. And the movie of the week, the variety is quite astounding. The one that I didn't do, which was episode 1 of season 1, first aired on September the 23rd, 1969, was called Seven in Darkness, with drama about a plane crash. But all the survivors are blind and they have to try and figure out how to get out of the wilderness. Right? It was kind of borderline. I could have picked up this one, but I also read on and I found out the next one had some more interesting aspects. For example, a spin-off series. So I thought that might be worth discussing here. And the premise is a little more fantasy sci-fi. So it kind of works. It's called The Immortal. Now, this one aired on September the 30th, 1969. It was a Tuesday, where basically a man who seems to be aging much slower than he should. He's supposed to be 43. He looks much younger. They talk about he doesn't particularly look much younger to me, but in the script he does. Played by Christopher George. And it turns out that he gives a blood transfusion to a dying billionaire who suddenly recovers, and the doctor figures out he's some sort of genetic not aberrations. He has a genetic makeup that basically keeps him alive way longer than other people. His blood factors, he has all the immunity needed against everything. This, that, and the other. Basically, the doctor declares you're virtually immortal. First, he says you'll live 5 times longer than any other human if you're not injured. As long as you keep yourself safe, you'll age way slower. And then he basically declares you're basically immortal. Now the millionaire finds out, who has recovered and feels a lot better. Finds out about it, and then shenanigans ensue. This man is asked to cooperate and give blood on a regular basis, and he will be paid for it, but in the end it doesn't turn out, and they kind of kidnap him, and a plot ensues. Now, there's also a love interest. Carol Lindley's in this, also from Culture. Funny enough, I didn't quite recognise her. I just thought she was a very attractive, quite good actress, and only afterwards, when I looked up it was Carol Lindley, did I realise it was Carol Lindley. It's her hairstyle's quite different. We also get Jessica Walter as like a sort of the wife of this billionaire who's just fed up with him, basically, and that feeds into the plot as well. And we also get a very brief appearance from Ralph Bellamy. As I say, this spun into a series and was nominated for an Emmy Award. It was quite well received, I would imagine, from that. However, the actual spin-off, and things like Carol Lindley, Jessica Walter, Ralph Bellamy did appear, I believe, in some of the episodes. Maybe it was just for the pilot, I don't know. And following the pilot, 15 episodes aired, but it was cancelled. So it ran. The pilot aired on September the 30th, 1969, and episode 1 of the new show aired on September the 24th, 1970. So just under a year later, a series was produced. However, it only ran for 15 episodes up until January the 14th. It was cancelled in a cursory way, so there was no real closure from the show. There was also a subplot of being on the run. There was a subplot of he had a brother he'd never he didn't really know. He was looking for his brother because his brother may have all the same factors as him, and he wanted to protect his brother from all these billionaires chasing him. There were several, I believe. It's quite similar to The Fugitive, which was a recently finished show that was very popular, starring David Jansen, a Man on the Run. And this Man on the Run thing has been reused in TV. I guess Kung Fu's kind of like that. The Incredible Hulk definitely uses that plot structure, so it's kind of interesting. However, for whatever reason, this did not succeed. I quite liked it. one of the other reasons I picked this one was it's available on YouTube. You can go away and watch all 1 hour, 14 minutes of it yourself and see what you think. And it's in reasonable quality as well. So, I thought this was a good sort of example of what ABC were doing here. But ABC, this was very successful, ABC. There. The number of movies were nominated for Emmys, and the genre, the genre's covered all over the place. There was westerns, there were comedy westerns, various mysteries. Another one that was the kind of a mystery one that could have been was the 5th episode ever aired, which I believe led to a potential spin-off series, or maybe it never spun into a series, but that was the plan. It was one called The Monk, which was a private investigator whose surname was Monk. It's one of those. And so on and so forth. Particular standouts for me, I've already mentioned Jewel, The Night Stalker, Tribes. But there's a number of interesting ones, and I'm just scrolling through this. I recognise a few of them. So it's there's one here, Gidget Grows Up, which is a spin-off from an old Gidget series, I guess. How about that? So they were doing all sorts of interesting things. There's even a documentary as part of this. There was one about a documentary about Robert F. Kennedy, for example. So they were all over the place. Some interesting stuff. And it's interesting, they aired weekly, so the production rate was kind of prodigious. Always started on September of the year, and worked through until May, and there were 5 seasons in all. And I'm not going to count all the episodes, but for example, season 1 and 2, 25 episodes. After that, we were in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s per season. That's quite amazing. Season 5 has 70 episodes. Presumably, they were airing twice a week sometimes to fit them in between September and May. They must have been, right? to go at that rate. So it was kind of an interesting show and worth a bit of a mention in the Anthology Hall of Fame, TV Anthology Show Hall of Fame. And, there's some outstanding movies too. I go away and watch it. I think the other one I haven't mentioned yet so far is an anthology horror movie, which so we got an anthology of an anthology here, getting a bit meta, which is Trilogy of Terror. That struck a chord with a lot of people. The Zensuni doll, Karen Black did a great job in that. That's a real standout one as well. There's probably many standout ones if I were to go through this list, and at some point I may even try, and I don't think you can probably get every film, but there's quite a lot of them I'm hoping on YouTube, so it may be worth a look. Okay, I will wind it up there. Before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to